I remember the sound before anything else. The keys! A soft metallic jingle. Light. Almost cheerful. And yet, the second I heard it, my chest tightened because I recognized that sound. Those weren't just any keys. They were my keys. My name is Rachel Miller, and this is the moment my marriage quietly cracked open. My husband, Daniel Miller, was standing in the middle of the living room, smiling wide, shoulders back, soaking in the attention like he'd just done something heroic. The Christmas tree was still glowing behind him, half lit, because one strand had burned out weeks ago and we never fixed it. His mother, Linda Miller, stood across from him with her hands clasped, already trembling like she knew something big was coming. "Mom," Daniel announced, loud and proud, "for New Year, I'm giving you a 2-bedroom apartment." There was a pause, just a breath. Then he placed the keys into her palm. She gasped. One hand flew to her chest. People clapped. Someone laughed. Someone said, "Wow, that's amazing." I didn't move because no one had asked me. No one had warned me. And the apartment he had just gifted to his mother was mine. I felt it then, that slow, sinking feeling, the kind that settles in your stomach when something irreversible has just happened and everyone else is celebrating it. Linda hugged Daniel tightly, crying tears that demanded admiration. "I raised such a good son," she said proudly. She didn't look at me, not once, and in that moment I understood something painful. This wasn't generosity. This was entitlement disguised as family love. When the applause faded, Daniel finally glanced in my direction, not to check how I felt, but to confirm I'd play along. "You're okay with this, right?" He said casually. "It's just temporary. Family helps family. Temporary." That word echoed in my head. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I could feel the trap forming. I knew if I spoke up, the room would turn on me. I'd become the selfish wife, the woman who doesn't respect her husband's mother. So I stayed quiet, and I watched everything. If you've ever sat in a room where people were celebrating something, that cost you your dignity. Stay with me. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because I promise, you're not alone in this. That night, after everyone left, Linda walked through the apartment slowly. Too slowly. Opening doors, standing in doorways, taking mental ownership of the space. "This room gets such good light," she said. "That second bedroom will be perfect." Perfect for what? She didn't say. Daniel followed behind her, nodding, smiling, completely comfortable. Not once did he clarify anything. Not once did he say, "This is Rachel's place." At one point, Linda turned to him and said, "You did the right thing." And Daniel replied without hesitation, "Yeah, it just made sense." That was the moment something shifted. Inside me, no anger, no explosion, just clarity. Later that night, when we were alone, I finally asked him quietly, "Why didn't you talk to me first?" Daniel sighed like I was being unreasonable. "I knew you'd overthink it," he said. "She needs stability. And it's not like you're losing anything." Not like I was losing anything. I lay awake beside him that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something I didn't want to admit. Somewhere along the way, loyalty had turned into expectation, and my silence had been mistaken for consent. I'm not a confrontational person. I don't yell. I don't throw accusations. I observe. I notice patterns. And when something feels off, I look closer. So the next morning, while Daniel and Linda were out celebrating, I opened my laptop. I told myself I was just checking, just reassuring myself. I pulled up the lease. My name was there. Only mine. Exactly as it had always been. But then I noticed something else. A recent document. A request. A change I hadn't approved. My heart started pounding, because this wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't emotional generosity. This had been planned. And suddenly, Daniel's confidence made sense. Linda's certainty made sense. The way my opinion hadn't mattered at all finally made sense. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. Because in that moment, I understood something they didn't. They thought my silence meant weakness. What it really meant was that I had stopped arguing and started preparing. The document was dated 3 weeks earlier. That was the part that made my stomach drop. 3 weeks meant this didn't start with the keys. It started long before, while we were still having normal conversations, still laughing at dumb TV shows, still acting like a married couple who made decisions together. I sat there staring at the screen. The apartment quiet around me, suddenly aware of how much silence can weigh. It wasn't a completed transfer. Not yet, but it was formal, intentional, the kind of step you don't take unless you expect. The next one to follow? They hadn't told me because they didn't plan to ask. I closed my laptop just as the front door opened. She walked in first, already comfortable, shoes off, bag on the counter, talking about how crowded the street parking was, like this had been her home for years instead of hours. She started pointing things out windows, walls, corners that could be improved, the way people talk when they're mentally rearranging a space. He followed her, nodding along, smiling. Neither of them asked how I was doing. That night at dinner, I decided to stop guessing and see how far the truth would go if I let it breathe. "So," I said casually, pushing food around my plate, "how long have you two been talking about the apartment?" There was a pause. "Just long enough," she answered first. "Oh, for a while now. These things take time." "A while." He cleared his throat and added, "Yeah, it came up before." Came up. Not we discussed it. Not we planned it together. Just came up. Something tight settled in my chest, not anger yet, but the quiet grief of realizing I'd been excluded on purpose. Later, when she stepped into the hallway to take a call, I asked him softly, "Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. "Because I knew you'd make it complicated," he said. "You always overthink things like this." I waited for the rest. The reassurance. The acknowledgement. It didn't come. Over the next few days, the shift became impossible to ignore. She started moving things, small things, cabinets, counter space. She referred to the apartment as my place when she was on the phone. She talked about when she'd be fully settled. Every time I looked to him, he smoothed it over. "She's just excited. You're being sensitive. It's not that deep." Gaslighting doesn't feel dramatic in real life. It feels quiet, reasonable, like maybe you really are imagining things. Until you hear the truth when no one thinks you're listening. One evening I was in the bedroom when I heard her voice in the kitchen, low and confident. "He already promised," she said into the phone. "It's basically done. I stopped moving. Basically done." She laughed softly. Then she added, "She'll come around. She always does." That sentence did something irreversible. I stepped into the doorway. She turned, startled but not guilty. "What's basically done?" I asked. She smiled, calm, comfortable. "Oh," she said lightly, "he explained everything to me. The apartment, the paperwork, all of it." I looked at him. He didn't deny it. He didn't even explain. "We'll talk later," he said. That was it. No conversation. No clarification. Just dismissal. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to convince anyone of anything. Instead, I made a decision. The next morning while they were out, I made phone calls. Quiet ones. I spoke to a lawyer. I kept it factual. No emotion. Just ownership, documents, dates. The answer was clear. The apartment was mine. Solely mine. No transfer without my consent. No shortcuts. No loopholes. And the document I'd seen? It wasn't harmless. It was the beginning of a move they assumed I wouldn't stop. When I got home, they were already talking about logistics, furniture, timelines, like the outcome was guaranteed. They spoke around me, not to me, and I let them, because at that point I understood something they didn't. They thought my silence meant surrender. What it really meant was that I had stopped reacting. And once I stopped reacting, everything changed. Because when people believe they've already won, they get careless. Once I stopped reacting, the apartment felt different. Not quieter, clearer. I stopped arguing and started paying attention, not to what they said, but to what they assumed. How plans were discussed as if they were already settled, how decisions were made without checking if I was still part of them. They thought I was backing down. What I was actually doing was stepping aside and letting them move forward, far enough to expose themselves. I didn't change overnight. That would have raised suspicion. I stayed calm, agreeable, quiet in a way that made them comfortable. When she talked about repainting the hallway, I nodded. That would look nice, I said once. I watched relief flicker across her face. Comfort makes people sloppy. At night, while they slept, I organized documents, screenshots, emails, anything that showed intent. I didn't rush. I didn't miss details. I learned when to disappear inside my own home. He started assuming my compliance. "You're okay with that, right?" He'd say, already moving on before I answered. And because I didn't push back, he heard yes. One afternoon, he came home energized. "I told her she can start bringing her things this weekend," he said. "It'll help her feel settled." I looked up from the counter. "Okay." He smiled, relieved. That smile told me everything. The boxes started appearing. A coat in the closet, shoes by the door, framed photos placed just slightly off-center, like they were testing how much space they could take. Each box was a quiet claim. And every time I said nothing, the confidence grew. The lawyer had been clear with me. The apartment was mine alone. He wasn't on the lease, and legally, I had every right to secure my own property as long as I did it cleanly. So I waited. I chose the timing carefully. The morning of New Year's Eve. They both left early talking about errands. Celebrations, fresh starts. She said it with a smile. Fresh start. Once the door closed, the apartment felt peaceful in a way it hadn't for weeks. I didn't rush. I made coffee. Stood by the window for a moment. Let myself feel the weight of the decision, not fear, but finality. Then I made the calls. The locksmith came first. Professional, efficient, no drama. By the time he left, the locks were changed and the old keys were useless. The courier arrived next. The envelope was thick, official, impossible to ignore. By sunset, everything was done. I was sitting on the couch when my phone buzzed. "The key's not working," he said, laughing slightly like it was a glitch. "Did you change the locks?" I didn't answer. A few minutes later, another call, this one sharper. "Okay, seriously, open the door." Then the tone shifted. "You're being dramatic," he said. "This isn't funny." I stayed silent. The knocking started, firm at first, then louder. "Rachel," he said, irritation creeping in. "You can't just lock me out." Then his voice cracked just a little. "Open the door." I stood on the other side, breathing steadily. When I finally opened it, just enough to see him, his confidence was gone. His phone was in his hand. His face had drained of color. "What did you do?" he demanded. I held out the envelope. "What should have been done from the beginning," I said calmly. "Handled legally." He skimmed the papers, scoffing at first. "This won't hold," he said quickly. "You've gone too far." Then he read slower. His jaw tightened. His breathing changed. "This is insane," he whispered. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," I said, "because you already decided without me." Headlights swept across the driveway. Her car. She stepped out, smiling until she saw us standing there. She walked up confidently, reached for the door, and froze. The key didn't turn. She tried again, harder. Then she looked at me. "What is this?" she demanded. I didn't answer. Her face shifted, not anger, yet disbelief. Like the ground had moved under her feet without warning. He started talking all at once, papers shaking in his hands. She went silent. And in that silence, everything they'd assumed finally collapsed. Because the one thing they never prepared for was me acting. They thought my quiet meant I wouldn't protect myself. They were wrong. And once that truth settled in, there was no way back. Silence settled between us. Not the awkward kind, the heavy kind. The kind that comes when every argument has already been used and none of them worked. She spoke first. "You can't do this," she said, but the confidence was gone. Her eyes kept flicking to the door, then back to his hands clutching the papers. "This has to be a misunderstanding." I shook my head slowly. "It isn't." He turned to me, voice tight. "Rachel, you don't just lock your husband out." "I didn't," I said calmly. "The court papers made it clear. I secured my property." That was when it truly landed. Her posture stiffened, the assumption she'd been standing on that this was temporary. That someone would fix it for her collapsed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if searching for a version of reality where she still had authority. "You're being ungrateful," she finally said weakly. I met her eyes. "You tolerated me because I stayed quiet. That's not the same as welcoming me." For the first time, she had no response. He tried a different approach. "We can talk about this. You didn't have to go this far." "I didn't go far," I said. "I went legally." That's when his certainty cracked. At first, he laughed short and disbelieving, like this was a stunt I'd get tired of. Then he told me I was overreacting, that I'd gone too far. And when none of that moved me, the laughter stopped. He sank down onto the steps outside the door, papers crumpling in his hands, staring at the floor like it might give him answers. She looked at him, then back at me. Nothing left to say. They left together that night. Not because I demanded it, but because there was nowhere else to stand. When the door closed, the apartment felt different. Not empty, clear. The next days were quiet. He texted, apologized, promised therapy, promised change. I answered once. "This didn't happen because of one mistake," I wrote. "It happened because of a pattern." We met later to finish things properly. No shouting. No scenes. Just signatures. His mother stopped calling when she realized nothing would change. Life moved on. And this is what stayed with me. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it prepares. I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by stopping the moment respect disappeared. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, that tightness, that quiet warning, you're not imagining it. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the moment before you choose yourself.